Welcome to the Breakfast Leadership Show, where we interview global thought leaders on business, leadership, and life. Here's your host, keynote speaker, best-selling author, and chief burnout officer of the Breakfast Leadership Network, Michael Levitt.
Welcome back. I've got Eric Dahan on the line. Eric, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Looking forward to our conversation, and thank you for being a part of the show. So share with the audience a little bit about you and this awesome work that you do and in marketing and all the stuff that you do.
Yeah. I'm a co-founder of Open Influence, started the company just over 8 years ago, pretty much right out of college. And, we're an influencer marketing company, and we were, just really looking for an opportunity prior to starting the company for a way to market an app I had, and was trying different things, and really stumbled across working with people on social that weren't celebrities, just had a large following, and just grew from there. I've been doing this for 8 years and experienced doing all things influencer, working with all sorts of brands and industries, and across all types of influencer verticals as well.
So when you're working with people that aren't necessarily well known, but they have a pretty decent following on social media, what are some of the things that they did to get to that level? Was it just consistency or connecting with a lot of people over a period of time? Or was there just, because I'm curious just to see, how some of those people were able to, get a pretty decent following without necessarily being quote unquote famous?
Yeah, I think the right way to look at it's like a marketplace, right? And if you could picture the influencer world as a marketplace where you have people on one side consuming the content, and then other people creating the content that they consume. And so really, when you think about supply and demand is sort of that driver. And when you think about it in that lens, a lot of influencers, like companies do, right? They came early to a platform. They created a type of content that, that was maybe underserved, where there was demand for it. And they addressed that market. They grew organically with the platform, with their audience. And that tends to be really how a lot of influencers get started. Like with any new platform, the most opportunities early on, like with any new industry, right? The first movers have that first mover advantage. And so, that's really it. And we saw it with Instagram early on. We saw it last year, and even now with TikTok with influencers, and we're seeing it really unfolds in front of our eyes on Clubhouse.
Yeah, the Clubhouse thing is something that, I've dived into a little bit, and, I was actually, jumped into a call earlier, and I saw that Tom Peters, now he's a leadership guru that I've followed since the late 80s, and he's there just having a conversation with some people, and I'm like, I'm literally in a room with somebody that I've been following for decades. And, I got in there late, so I wasn't able to, raise my hand and ask a question because I didn't even know he was doing one. And it looks like, based on his followings, I think he signed up today. So I was like, okay, well, caught that one. But it's interesting on all of those platforms. It's the early ones that tend to grab the traction because Clubhouse is here. Now we know that all the other social media platforms are going, okay, we need to do the social audio thing. But it's like, okay, yeah, you might be able to get some inroads on that. But my hunch is unless they are able to copy it in such a way or how it's set up too. Because I think about this, for example, all famous people are on Clubhouse. Okay, you can't DM them on there. You can only access them based on if they say, yeah, I'll chat with you kind of thing. Doesn't have any other personal information other than their social media things. So it protects them. They can say, yeah, I can go in and I can have a conversation without worrying about, someone calling me on my cell phone type of deal. Where, a platform like Facebook, for example, you could do it from your Facebook page type of thing, but you don't necessarily, you may accidentally sign up under your personal Facebook profile, which sometimes can have a lot more information on it than you'd want to share just with everybody. So it's going to be interesting to see how those other platforms can adapt to this and still provide, I think, that safety net that a lot of influencers and famous people have, behind, the Clubhouse, methodology and in the way that they have things set up.
Yep. Yeah, I think too, Clubhouse is unique. It's really a platform centered around subject matter expertise and domain expertise, right? And so I think in terms of like market opportunity, it opens up the door for people that aren't just, new parents posting nice pictures or great video creators. Like it really just opens up the door for like a lot of thought leaders, where they could share their domain expertise in a much more comfortable format, similar to like a panel at a conference or whatnot, right? Or a conference call. So like the level of content complexity is fairly low. Barrier to entry to create that kind of content is pretty low. And so it's really great for subject matter experts who aren't necessarily content creators. It allows them to be content creators with less difficulty.
Yeah, and it's really easy to get in. And I know a lot of people are still complaining that, hey, it's not on Android. It's not on Android. Well, sometime in the month of May is what I'm hearing that it's going to open up. So if you are on Clubhouse and you're starting to move some things around and starting to get a little bit of traction, you're going to have a tsunami of people that have been wanting to get on the platform jump in. So it's a great opportunity from a marketing standpoint to say, okay, let's get everything ready to go, because once you have that market open up, the Google Play Store is going to be slammed with people downloading it, because they're going to want to be on it, and then they're going to be looking around going, okay, what's on here? So it's definitely one of those things where you from a marketing standpoint, you want to plan ahead. I mean, you should always plan your marketing, because if you don't, then it's not going to get you very far. But it's definitely an interesting platform to watch as it's unfolded, really during a pandemic. It's always interesting to see things that are birthed during really challenging times in history and society. And obviously Clubhouse is one of those things. So with all the customers and the clients that you've worked with, what are some of the common things that you see organizations struggle with when it comes to influencer marketing and trying to get their, I guess I want to say not necessarily their message out, but that's ultimately what it ends up boiling down to is what do they want to get out?
I think a lot of brands and companies, what causes them to struggle with influencer marketing is I think one, they underestimate what goes into influencer marketing and the amount of the number of moving parts and the amount of time it really takes. I mean, everyone kind of thinks initially before they get into it, oh yeah, I'll send some product out and send a few emails. Super easy, super great. And then once they dive in, they realize the dynamic, it's pretty involved. There's a lot of communication involved. There's a lot of back and forth, lots of hand holding with creators and influencers. There's just so much there. And the other thing that gets underestimated is also the importance of creative involved in the process, of really understanding what are the concepts and ideas and creative guidance that's really going to allow an influencer activation to really succeed. And also the level of quality control is another challenge. So like there are all these moving parts, and it's very common, what we've seen early on is, brands would work with us, say, hey, we had a great experience, but we want to kind of see what else is out there, who else is out there, like maybe there's a better way to do this. And then some will try it on their own, some will work with third parties, and they come back to us and say, wow, like all these things that you guys did in terms of the process you took and the steps you take, like we get now why you do it. We didn't really understand why you guys were doing that. We thought it might not have been necessary, but now we totally get it because we did it with this other company, or we tried doing it in-house and all these problems came up. And so, and there's no secret sauce for us. The secret sauce is we just do so much work in this space, and we've had so much time to really learn at each and every step. and develop those best practices based on what the dynamics like in the industry and what's actually needed for this to succeed.
Well, it's part of your organization's DNA. And everything that you do, there's consistency. You've taken the lessons learned along the way. My hunch is your teams do one of those weird things that a lot of organizations don't do. And in my career, there was before it was me running a company, of course, there was only one organization that ever did this with a project management situation where at the end of every project, they brought the project team together and then they would bring in some key people from other projects. And we had a debriefing of, okay, what worked? What went well? What did we learn from what we just did? Is there anything that we could apply to any of the other things that we're working on right now? Did we pick up some efficiencies? And when they did that, what they ended up doing was streamlining all the steps that they did in a project to the point where the organization had a couple choices. Number one, they're saying, okay, we're a little heavy on project people now because we're so efficient. We've got these extra people. What should we do? And, some organizations will say, well, you know what, we could downsize a little bit because we don't need them. But that organization, which was a Fortune 500 organization, said, well, you know what pieces are we missing to add an additional team? And it was only a couple pieces. So all of a sudden, they increased their, ability to take on more clients by 25%. If you can find 25% of a revenue boost, you're on the front page of Business Magazine going, look at the rapid growth this company has done. And it was created by looking at the efficiencies. It wasn't like cold calling and all the other kind of stuff, which is, reaching out and finding new business is important, kind of helps things along. But by looking at how you do things and improving them along the way, created that situation where you had a customer leave and they came back. When you were describing that, I was kind of thinking about the show Mad Men, and there was clients that occasionally would leave and all of a sudden they'd come crawling back and Don would welcome them in open arms. Good to see you again, as if nothing happened, and away they go. And it's going to say, everybody's going to say, well, we can go do this maybe cheaper. Well, cheaper's not always better. And you get what you pay for, and sometimes you don't even get that. So tread carefully when you're looking at things. And best practice, it pays dividends. It does. I mean, I've learned that lesson myself. When I deal with any type of thing that I look for, like, okay, yes, I can buy this camera for $50 less than this one, but the ratings on the one that's a little bit higher is like heads and tails above everything. Like, I'm buying the better camera. Why? It's going to make a big difference in the things that I do. You could approach that in business. You'll see, yes, you're going to be spending money, but the return you're going to get is going to be generating so many more opportunities for you. So kudos to that client. Kudos to that client that came back. So
yeah. No, that's exactly right. I think people are stepping over dollars sometimes to pick up pennies with that, right? It's like, you could save, there might, and there's always someone willing to offer to do it for less, right? To try to win the business. And, but, ultimately, if you're a company, do you want to save, 10% on the total campaign price, or do you want to run it 20% more effectively, right? So or 30% more effectively, right? Because ultimately, if you're a business, you're trying to drive sales, you're trying to drive value, and you're going to be looking at it from a unit economic standpoint. And so, if you try to save and cut corners, because that's how it's done, right? When people try to undercut, they're like, oh yeah, we can cut these corners. You don't work with the best influencers. You overpay those influencers actually on an individual level, even though the total amount might cost less. So you end up actually getting less reach, less impressions, less click-throughs, all that for your money. The content isn't great, so it doesn't convert as well. And so, you need to do things right, regardless of what you do, right? And so it doesn't mean the budget has to be massive. It just means that whatever it is, you do it right. And so, one of the things I look at is like, building a brand and marketing is kind of like building a house, right? Like, are you going to go, cut corners on the foundation? Are you going to cut corners on the framing? Are you going to cut corners on the roofing? You can cut corners on all of that, but what you're going to have is you're going to spend 3 times as much in repair work and 4 times the time. And so it's not, oftentimes it's better to do things once and do them right. And of course, you never want to overpay, but either, pay for value for sure.
Agreed, and definitely gives you a better return long term on everything. So, one of the questions that came to mind too that I wanted to ask you is, during this pandemic and ultimately when we exit it, where do you see influencer marketing going? What are some of the things that you're seeing already that this pandemic has created that would create maybe some different ways to approach things, going forward?
Yeah, I mean, overall, the pandemic has really increased in influencer marketing spends across the board because everything has moved more to digital. Influencer marketing was always growing just because at the end of the day, the world's becoming more social and people trust people, right? Like, and that's where the effectiveness is. And so, with that, and more time being spent on phones, especially during COVID, there's been a big increase in influencer marketing spends. It's been great for our business. And, in terms of where I see the market going, I think we're seeing a lot more of influencer marketing going more bottom funnel. So with a lot of large brands, they had a tendency to look at it just from an awareness standpoint. And that was mainly driven by the fact that they really had this fragmented, sort of points of purchase for their products, right? You can go in store through a retailer. You can go through a retail partner or one of many. You can go online. You can go to a different site online. So it was a very fragmented process. And I think with COVID hitting, a lot of brands decided to invest more heavily on their own websites and e-commerce. We saw the shift there, or to their partners' e-commerce sites. But it created this level of traceability that wasn't really there, and ability to track conversions. And so I think that's really been what was needed for a lot of these large brands. Now, a lot of the direct-to-consumer brands were already doing this because that was their business, right? And so, but I think for the industry as a whole, we're going to see it move more and more bottom funnel, and conversions be a bigger sort of focus for brands as opposed to just general awareness.
I think it makes a ton of sense. And I know a lot of organizations are focusing, like you said, they're looking at their own website. Yes, we're on all the social media channels, but they're also going back to the thing that they can control. And they're going, okay, how do we get a better grasp of who's coming here? What are they looking for? And how we were ranking on, internet search and, especially, with SEO and changing landscapes and the end of cookies. I know Cookie Monster's got to be disappointed about that, but all the things that are changing, the stuff with Apple and Facebook and Google changing some things, I believe in June, there's a lot of moving parts when it comes to that. But at the end of the day, it's like you want to make sure that you have everything on your site where you can, one, capture all the information that you need to get, but also provide the information that your consumers are looking for. Yep. And it's a holistic approach because the customers will tell you. That's one of the benefits of this social media world that we live in is customers will be quite vocal on what they want. They'll say, why did you change the formula on this? Or I really would love to see if you would offer this product with this. And capture that information. That is, and a lot of people say, well, that's a lot of noise. It's like, no, it's organizations prior to social media spent a ton of money trying to get that feedback from customers. Now they get it for a much more affordable rate because they'll tell you as a customer, they'll say, yeah, I would like to see you offer this type of thing or service. And organizations used to pay thousands and thousands on research and calling up people on the phone and saying, okay, we're going to ask you 40 questions on things you would like to have. And they may or may not capture some things that people want. This way, it's like they're feeding you. They're giving you that information. So it's definitely a positive thing for business to be able to tap into that.
Absolutely. And that's, you know, I think that's been the sort of trend over the years is advertising has gone from the big madman sort of world of like, here are some big ideas that really excite the client, but we don't really know what happens afterwards, to the world we live in now, where you have such a direct feedback loop. It's almost instantaneous. You post a piece of content online, you can see how many people like the content, what people are saying about it. You can compare that to others. You can see how many clicks it's generating, how many purchases. So we live in a world where there's a lot more information and a shorter feedback loop. And I think that's going to really impact how businesses operate as a whole, right? It used to be like, oh, here's marketing off to the side, but marketing is really your revenue engine, right? And so, you know, instead of a cost center, it's a revenue center, right? And so I think one of the interesting things is, you know, why are companies like Deloitte or Accenture getting into the marketing industry? Well, because they know that's what impacts P&Ls. And if you can use that data, you could affect supply chains, you could affect R&D, product planning, everything else.
Yeah, that's those big advisory firms, you know, doing things like that, and, you know, getting a bigger supply chain. I mean, that's a great example.
Yeah.
To be able to impact supply chain by creating demand for something and we've seen it, you know, there's things that go viral that, you know, people want to get, whether it was those, you know, those banned shoes that had the blood in them, or, you know, whatever else that we happen to see. It's that demand, you know, like we talked about a few minutes ago about the Clubhouse and Android phones. You know, everyone's ready. It's like as soon as that shows up in the store, they're downloading, they're setting up their account, and there's going to be a ton of people going in. There's a ton of demand for that, and that's why. Yep. You know, when Clubhouse goes public, and this is not stock advice, but you know, I know they're getting a bunch of revenue, and I know eventually they will go public, and the owners and the creators are going to be rich. So it's good, and it's good for them. I mean, that it bodes well for bringing on more ideas and more things to make organizations come up with concepts and things that consumers will want. And if you do that, you're just paving your own road to whatever, you know, success looks for you.
Yep, absolutely.
Eric, I've loved our conversation today. Where can people find out more about you and this incredible work your team's doing?
Yeah, I mean, you can go to our website, openinfluence.com, or you could reach out to me directly. I'm very active on LinkedIn. And so, you know, feel free to follow me, connect with me, whatever, DM me, and looking forward to it.
Awesome. And I'll definitely have that information in the show notes. So, Eric, thanks so much for this conversation. I've enjoyed our chat.
Awesome. Thanks for having me again. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to the Breakfast Leadership Show, part of the Breakfast Leadership Network. Visit breakfastleadership.com for tips on empowering your business and your life.